type amps have direct outputs on them, and lots of times they'll even be balanced direct outputs, so you can feed straight into a snake and into a system from the direct output. Lots of times the old, the guitarists, the rock guitarists with the Marshall amps and the big stacks and so forth, they have a specific sound that they're trying to get, which is influenced by the amplifier and speaker of that guitar amp. When you plug into the direct output, you're plugging in preamp, pre-speaker. So that effect that they're looking for, the distortion effect or that characteristic they're looking for from their guitar is not, you don't have the effect because you're not going through the amp and speaker. So you may amplify the speaker itself. If you picture the cone of the speaker here, and there's actually two of them in here, it's two little 8-inchers. The movement of the speaker and the air movement coming off of that doesn't come from the center of the speaker. It doesn't come from the outer edge. It comes from that angled part of the cone. So you're actually miking right off of that cone, but not centered on the speaker, off to one side.
Now, you're not generally recommending miking an amp, are you?
It depends on what the goal is. If again, the musician is trying to get the sound that the amplifier section of the guitar amp and the speaker characteristics of that guitar amp, if that's what he's looking for, then yes, you would mic the amp. And it happens a lot in rock shows, that type of thing, in big concert shows. Every musician is going to be different. Every musician on a pro level may want a different microphone because he wants a different characteristic. So it's not just a general mic that you set in front of there, it's a specific mic that he would, maybe a Sennheiser 421 is used a lot, or was used a lot a few years ago on guitar amps. So you run a different type of microphone on a guitar amp. Sometimes you'll take a direct out and a mic out, and you'll mix those at the board to get a certain characteristic. It all depends on what that musician, that particular band is looking for sound, and you get different characteristics by doing those different things. If we're running a keyboard, for example, and we want a direct output, you can come straight out of the keyboard. Some keyboards have, I'm not going to go there yet, and that can go into a direct box like this, which will take the signal from a 1/4-inch high impedance plug, convert it to a balanced XLR, and send it back to the board. What we didn't talk about, and I'll touch on this really quickly, is the difference between high, and I'm moving too close.
I gotcha. High
and low impedance signals. A high impedance means there's more resistance going through whatever the pickup device is, whether it's the amplifier or the, the microphone or the pickup on a guitar or something like that. Most instruments have high impedance outputs. Cheaper microphones that have a 1/4-inch plug on it, the $30 Radio Shack microphones are high impedance. Because there's higher resistance going through that element, you can't go more than 15-20 feet with that signal. So you can't use a high impedance signal here and expect to run high impedance back to the mixer and have it work, because there's too much resistance to be able to get that far. So you use a low impedance signal, and that's why we have direct boxes to convert from high impedance, high resistance, to low impedance, low resistance, or balanced, which also gives you a ground drain, which would any imposing noise that comes in on that cable, and it electronically balances that signal so it's a nice, clean, solid, reliable signal back at the mixer, 200 feet away or 100 feet away, whatever the length of the snake is. So again, we talked about high impedance cables. And then we would have to come out, if we came out direct from the keyboard or the mixer, something would have to make it a balanced low impedance signal. If it's built into the amplifier, which many amplifiers have. It's doing it for you, or you can go into a direct box and get it converted to low impedance that way. Questions?
Playing guitar, if someone just got straight up acoustic
Yes.
and they're playing into a microphone, talk
Yes.
about that if you could.
Excellent, yes. There aren't any guitars here. Obviously, and this is a good example, the way this is set up. If I'm playing a microphone, the strings vibrate over the body of the guitar, which is then transmitted essentially into that hollow wooden structure, creating some resonance and some warmth to it, and then the sound comes out of the sound hole. In essence, what I want to do is mic as close to that sound hole directly over those strings as I can. If you look at electric guitar, that's right where the pickups are on electric guitar. If you look at an acoustic guitar with a pickup put into it, they're usually right in that range, because that's where the optimal sound comes out of that guitar. So in essence, what we do is we mic, move this over just a little bit, we mic right over that sound hole. Now, you can't be in the way of the guy's hand if he's playing right over the sound hole. So at times, you'll actually move a little bit above it. Okay, you still get a good pickup off the strings, you still get the warmth from the body of the guitar. But we pick up right there. And again, you want to be as close a proximity to those strings as possible, within reason. He still has to be able to play. And then, of course, in this case, we've got Boom with a vocal mic on top also, because Lou picks up his mandolin acoustically and his vocals.
Does it ever run a risk of, like, does the vocal mic double up on the acoustic instrument being played too, because it's in such close proximity?
It can be, and you can actually create phase cancellation because you're picking up both of these signals at a different distance from that instrument. And so that as the waves come in, they're not timed exactly with each other, and you can get phase cancellation out of, and actually cancel that instrument or the vocals. Therein, again, lies the reason why we're keeping it as close to the instrument as possible and keeping our vocals as close to the person's mouth as possible, so that we're not doing that ambient thing where how do I say this? My distance to the microphone for vocals is much closer, so my gain comes down a little bit, and the distance to this microphone is much farther as I'm close, and the instrument is closer, so that we get more separation.
Okay.
I'm not sure if that makes sense.
No, that's great. That's great.
I want to watch that video back. So it allows us to come down to gains because our proximity to the microphone is closer, and you don't get as much of that wash. Now, interesting side note, just to illustrate the point, if you're miking drums and you've got overhead mics on the drums, you've got snare mic, you've got kick drum mic, and we've got really hot signals, really loud kick drum snare, kick drum snare and overhead mics. You can gate, and typically you'd have a separate effects unit where you gate those signals. So when I hit the snare, the threshold of signal hitting that microphone is hot,